The third out of the bottom of the eighth has just been made, the home team leading by a sliver, and then something like this takes place.
About for coming to this game and noise around here.
What is a save in baseball and what is a closer? This is Sports Simplified and let's get right into it. Now, starting with the Major League Baseball definition, a save is when a relief pitcher preserves their team's lead by doing one of the three following actions. Now, the first and most common is when a pitcher pitches at least one inning while preserving a lead no more than 3 runs, usually the final inning of the game, which is what we see most often today. Now, the second instance is when a pitcher pitches to which a team is leading by no more than 3. However, that has to be as well with runners on the bases, who's at the plate, and who's in the on deck circle. So in this hypothetical for this second option, your team can be leading by as many as 5 runs, but if the bases are loaded, you got a batter at the plate and the guy in the on deck circle, that relief pitcher can still record a save. To make it simple, if there's a chance that you can tie the ball game at any instance, then therefore it is an option for there to be a save recorded. The third option for recording a save is for a relief pitcher to pitch at least 3 innings. Now, the lineage of a save is actually kind of new in baseball's history, as it was a term used colloquially by general managers in the 1950s, simply relating to a relief pitcher who would end the game for their team victorious. Simply, a closer is ending the game, but it didn't really matter the score or what the situation was, it was simply ending the game. It wasn't until the early 1960s where a baseball writer by the name of Jerome Holtzman made specific criteria for the term he coined, the save, to which he created a statistic that could chart basically relief pitchers' successes, whereas that really wasn't a thing before because it was commonplace up until the 60s and past that, where starting pitchers would go the whole 9 innings and relief pitchers really weren't a crucial part of the team, nowhere near like they are today. It wasn't until 1969 where MLB officially adopted Holtzman's statistic as an official Major League Baseball statistic for a save. And at the head of that, the closer position pretty much was created since there was an official statistic to go with it. It wasn't until about 1979 where the first official closer was kind of made a thing with Bruce Sutter and the Cubs, due to him consistently finishing games for the Cubs and charting it as a save. And then once you saw in the 70s and 80s roll around, you had the likes of Dennis Eckersley, Steve Bedrosian, Lee Smith, a bunch of guys that were really important factors, you can say, in the closing game. Now, what kind of player is a closer, you might ask, on the team? Well, it's always the final pitcher that will finish the game. That's kind of what the GMs thought of in the 50s and has been the same way ever since. But really, the kind of player the closer is you can say it's the best relief pitcher a team has. Usually the guy on the team with the nastiest stuff who can throw extremely hard, has a couple of really solid pitches that can get batters out quite easily, and needs to be ready to pitch on a day-by-day basis, because if a team is lined up for a win consistently, that closer is going to go in pretty much every day for about 1 inning, usually closing whether that's the top of the ninth, the bottom of the ninth, or in some cases extra innings to finish the game and secure the win. But through the 90s and 2000s, we've seen the likes of arguably the greatest closer of all time, and Mariano Rivera, to Francisco Rodriguez, also known as K-Rod, who was a major focal factor of the Angels' successes in the 2000s and still holds the Major League single season save record, I believe at 68 saves. 62 saves for K-Rod. 62. But Closers have been a crucial part of baseball ever since, and today we still have some future Hall of Famers that are still doing it at the highest level, starting with Kenley Jansen on the Angels, or you could go to potentially Josh Hader on Houston, who is in the later part of his career but is definitely going to be a Hall of Famer. Craig Kimbrell was recently let go by the Braves, but he is going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer at the closer position. This year, one of the Hall of Famers going in the class of 2025 is Billy Wagner, who was a really solid closer for a long time with a couple different teams, but he kind of retired early and it was questionable whether or not he was going to go into the Hall of Fame, but as a result, he did this year. Another future Hall of Famer that is still getting it done is Aroldis Chapman, who arguably has the hardest fastball in the history of baseball, reaching the likes of 106 miles per hour, only comparable really to Nolan Ryan and, of course, you can say nowadays Ben Joyce. But some of these closers have the hardest stuff you will ever see that is so hard to hit. Of course, you have the signature cutter that was Mariano Rivera's pitch, which is a cut fastball, which it doesn't really go straight like a fastball or have a little run. It instead cuts kind of like a slider, but it's not as sharp and it is thrown a lot harder. Super hard to see, and that's why it is such a good pitch. Or you could go all the way back to Bruce Sutter and his split finger fastball, or the splitter, which that pitch comes out of the hand looking like a fastball but has extreme vertical break and comes into the plate a lot slower than a fastball, getting batters to swing not only over the top of it but way too early. But today, every team has a closer in some respects. Some are better than others, some of the best in the game today. You could start with Andres Munoz in Seattle, Emmanuel Clase, who's having a down year but still a very solid closer. In Cleveland, you got Yohan Duran in Minnesota, Ryan Helsley over in St. Louis. Of course, Josh Hader is still at the best of his game in Houston. A lot of really solid closers in this game. And, of course, you still have the Hall of Famers doing it, which Kenley Jansen is having as strong as year as he has in recent times. It's not really his fault that the Angels don't win as much as they need to, but he's been solid every time in safe situations, only blowing one so far on the season. Kind of a neat thing about a closer is that that's arguably the hardest position on a team mentally, being able to go in consistently and finish games. It is a very exhausting role mentally that is very tough and only cut out for the best of the best players, which is why there have been so few really good closers in the history of baseball compared to starting pitchers and otherwise. The closer is a very hard position, and whether you have Grant Balfour's rage, which we saw at the beginning, or you have Mariano Rivera's poker face where he never looked like he was rattled, these players have the very toughest mental fortitudes, and that's why they're able to get it done at the highest level consistently and make a name for themselves, because it is such a hard position. But that's part of what goes into being a closer, is having a unique personality. That has all to do with the closer introduction, kind of like we saw with Balfour. But really, every team with a closer has a special entrance where the lights go down, a song specifically chosen by the closer plays, the crowd gets energized, everyone gets excited because everyone knows that's the end of the game and that's what's going to lead to a win. And it's a very special part of the game of baseball. It's a very special player on the team because it is such a hard place to work, because it is such a hard position, and it is one of baseball's unique, great parts of the game that is super fun to watch. And always great because if a closer does his job successfully, you get a win. Like and follow for more.